Well, hello, my name is Dru Rai, and today I have Ed Sim with me, and we'll be talking about cybersecurity, AI, and everything around it. Well, first of all, thank you for your time. I really appreciate, you have such a big background. I don't know where to start, but let's start with some basics. It's like, first, tell us about yourself, and then we'll get into some of the content.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Super pumped to talk about security and how AI is kind of transforming that. Background, look, this is year 30 for me doing enterprise venture capital. My specialty is what I call inception investing, which is partnering with technical founders right around their time of incorporation. And that really means that I'm usually talking to founders during the idea maze process. And then when they're ready to go, the thesis is a little bit more formed from a product perspective, and we lead that round. And those check sizes can be anywhere from 500K to start up to 15 million. And so right now, my fund, Boldstart Ventures, we manage over 1.1 billion in assets.
Well, very nice to meet you. So you probably see so many variety, probably not only the one you invest, but you probably pass. Let's start with, I would say, what is your experience? 30 years is a long time in cybersecurity. When you go back to the days of, knock to the days of AI, tell me, what do you see the trends, the evolution from cybersecurity offense, and then we'll get to the defense in a minute.
Yeah, what's funny is that it's incredible what's happened. I made my first cybersecurity investment. I signed the term sheet on September 13th, 2001 for a company in New York, which was 2 days after September 11th, right? So you can imagine security was a big deal. And I remember at that point in time, it was one of the first SIM vendors ever. And the idea was, how do you convince people in the network operating center or NOC that they need to care about security, that they should start a SOC? Just think about that. That was 2001. That was, I don't know how many years ago is that, 24 years ago, 25 years ago. Fast forward today, look at how big the cybersecurity industry is. I mean, like when JP Morgan has a $17 billion budget and they're spending 1.1 billion on cybersecurity a year, I think it kind of tells you that you cannot actually have any application without protecting it, defending it, right? So I think that in and of itself, you have companies like Palo Alto. Who would have ever thought? I never thought in my wildest dreams 25 years ago, you'd have a $150 billion, $160 billion market cap cybersecurity company. That's absolutely insane.
It is amazing. I mean, the valuation of these cybersecurity companies, especially Palo and people like that. When you look at your vantage point in terms of now what you see, whether you invest or you pass, what are the currently I will call hot, and what is coming from your venture? Where you think the investment and the product are going when it comes to cybersecurity?
I think that's a great question. Well, first of all, since we partner, the most important thing is people, right? We partner with highly technical founders who have a unique insight. Usually a lot of that is born out of years of painting and experience, and they just don't find the right solution. And that's part one. Part two is where I see the world. I can tell you this, is that I've had some experience. I was the first investor in the board of a company called Protect AI, which was one of the first AI security companies that was out there. We got that started. I partnered with a guy named Ian Swanson and Dee and Badar, and that was a year before ChatGPT came out. And the thesis for us, when we underwrote the thesis, was that Ian was a multi-time founder that we've known for a decade. He was at AWS running kind of ML and SageMaker go-to-market. And he said, look, I believe that CISOs are blind right now. They have no visibility into how many models are being run and used in the company and how secure they are. And we're talking about stuff like data poisoning attacks, model attacks, all those kinds of things. And he said, I have no doubt. I know who I can sell to. I could probably get to 10 million of ARR within a few years. The question is I don't know if I can get past 10 because we just don't know if there's going to be a market for it. Well, guess what? We got very lucky and ChatGPT came out. And then, that was like November of 2022, maybe. And then all of a sudden everyone kept asking, how do I secure this stuff? How do I secure this stuff? Fast forward, we ended up selling the company for over $700 million to Palo Alto. It closed in May. And what I can tell you from that experience was I've never seen a market in cybersecurity, and I've been doing this since the very beginning, move this fast. It moved from nothing to something to working with Fortune 500 customers kind of through that process, and then a rapid acquisition. And after that, there's been probably like 20 acquisitions in AI since then. And I don't think any of them have really reached kind of that initial price that we had sold for. So that tells you where we are today.
Yeah, I mean, it's on one side is highly crowded, and on the other side it's very valued. When you see, all these founders and prospects, like, how do you differentiate between where you want to be in and where you want to take a pass?
Yeah, so it's always about the people first and kind of their expertise. I'll give you a good example. One company that we just announced our investment in was just a couple months ago in a company called Keycard.ai. And Keycard.ai was founded by two folks from Sneak and one former chief architect of All0. And the two folks from Sneak I backed previously twice. So I'd known them for over a decade. I was on the board of Sneak, so I kind of got to work with them very closely. But their thesis was very simple. They basically said, look, and this is the thesis moving forward. I mean, everyone's trying to solve the agent security problem, and there's 1,000 different ways to solve the agent security problem. Where people started was with something called NHIs or non-human identities, which was, hey, here's a dashboard. Here's all the non-human identities accessing, APIs and things like that. And then they created a dashboard around that posture management. And then they said, hey, these are areas that you should fix because we think it's insecure. These guys went a different approach. Leveraging their experience, they said, let's go back from first principles. How to allow builders, developers, and even agents to build authentication and authorization in a very simple way from the bottom up. And the idea was that when agents, let's just say there's a 10-step workflow. When agents are doing work, a couple of things. One is access should be dynamic and given at runtime and taken away at runtime. There should not be, like, an agent shouldn't have a forever access, right? Like if I'm buying a pair of jeans that's bought, I shouldn't have access forever for that, right, as an agent. Two is how do you cryptographically prove that the agent is the agent as you move along each step of the way? So that was their first core principles. And the third is how easy is it for agents to discover me when I'm typing into Claude code and building something, or how easy is it for a human to build into me? So that was the first principles. We ended up leading that initial round, the inception round, with Andreessen. And then we just announced a large $30 million additional round with our friends at Acre Capital, and Andreessen and us again. So anyway, that would be an example. It's people I've known. They just took a completely different approach. And by the way, this is probably one of the biggest battlegrounds moving forward in the next 3 years. I mean, you're talking about Palo buying CyberArk for over $20 billion. That's really still not hitting at the core of what the agent problem is. And I'm not saying that Keycard's the end all be all. There are going to be dozens of successful winners here, but there'll probably be hundreds of losers as well because everyone is trying to solve this problem.
Well, it's kind of interesting that approach, which is not protecting but building. It's like, how can you? It's more like a DevSecOps versus, well, let's just protect.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I mean, when you look at the AI use cases, most of them are agentic. Most of them are some kind of API or MCI. And that's where most of the value is, and that's where most probably the problems are, or we will find more problems. When you think, it's like when you look at the founders, do they come with like how to protect, or do they come how to build? Not that they're not same, but sometimes my experience is like they're two different kind of people.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're at odds. How do you spot these people?
I think that's a really good question, because I think what you're really saying is that the more security you layer on during the build process, the slower things are. And the faster you build, perhaps, the less secure you are. I mean, so there's this kind of constant tension. A couple of things. One is I think secure by default or secure by design, I think is very important, right? And that's kind of when I invested in Sneak. We actually left the whole idea of security engineering. So as people were coding and as they're pushing it out to production, we scanned everything and we would make sure it was secure. It's equivalent of fixing a car on an auto assembly line. If you get it very early, you're not going to have a recall that's very expensive, or a brand issue, right? So that's part one. But I think that has to be the fundamental principle of everything we build. Even all the vibe coding stuff, what scares me the most is that the vibe coding stuff is all built on, code that was sitting in Stack Overflow, open repos on GitHub, insecure code, right? So you're going to have to use AI to kind of build that in at first principles, number one. Number two is when you talk about the founders, I want founders that have a track record of building and launching product, right? They have to, it's one thing to talk, we have lots of CISOs coming in saying, hey, I want to create a security company, but That's all well and good, but if you can't build a product that people love and want, and when you know there's going to be a dozen competitors in there, it doesn't matter, right? So
I think you're right. I mean, I've been CIO for so many large private enterprise and now state, and I find CISOs are great using product.
yeah.
CISOs they can't engineer a product. You need another team to build and engineer, and they consume it to do their job, which is very important. It's very rare to find people who are, CISO's mindset in terms of output, but they're engineers at heart that they can build something to get that output.
We'll call that security-aware founders, right? And the other thing I think about is like people say, "Hey, how do you do what you do at inception when it's just an idea?" Because there's two kinds of security investments that we make. One is net new market opportunities, right? Investing in AI security before it became hot, investing in agent security before it became hot. What's next? Well, I can tell you more about AI data center security. But the point is that if I called a CISO up, 5 CISOs up during my diligence process, if you try to sell them a product that doesn't exist, they could give a shit less. What they care about is what problem are you solving for me? And they're not getting paid to buy into a flying car. They want a faster horse. So you have to sell them the faster horse while, the equivalent of offering them the flying car later, the upgrade cycle, right? And so that's kind of the interesting challenge because they're not paid to be innovative.
Yeah, they're not. I mean, to be honest, I've been running IT for 30 years, and it's a real fight to get resources for them, obviously, because first you need system, and data before you protect it. So it's a real conundrum. Um, is it fair to say that the company or the opportunities you seek are mostly at a customer product which is serving large customers, or they are meant for small and medium customers too? What's your target? When you think about the founders and the product they're building.
What's funny is that couple things. The thing that is most important to me is time to value. And time to value for me would be, hey, what did Wiz do very well? I talked to CISOs, and within minutes, the dashboard lit up and they saw things they could never saw before. And that kind of got them excited. They happened to be going after the largest kind of Fortune 500 customers. But I think that principle applies whether you're targeting smaller businesses. Let's just say, even if I targeted consumers, we'll call that PLG growth, right? Which is basically someone signs up for it, they have low friction, they kind of build around it, and it's very easy to get onboarded. I think that same principle applies whether you're selling a $5 million deal or a $5,000 deal, because you've got to make it very easy for people to use. What ends up happening though is that I have a predilection to tend to sell to larger enterprises, right? I've built a lot of relationships over time with CISOs and CAOs, and I kind of understand what they're thinking about, what they're buying, where they're willing to take risk, where they're not willing to take risk, and what kinds of people they're looking for. And that's just kind of me. I mean, I think it's harder. Look, the market opportunity for SMEs, small, medium enterprises, is massive, but I think it's also harder. You got to get a much better channel. You probably have to build the channel relationship much better from that format as well.
No, I think that's a great point. I mean, it's a fragmented market in that sense. Maybe MSPs, can be a good target.
Can we talk about MSPs for a second?
Yeah, please. Go ahead.
Because I think what we've been talking about is how do you secure the agents? What we haven't talked about is how do security companies use agents, or how do CISOs use agents to do things better? One of my biggest beliefs out there is that one is the AI has to work, but if you believe the AI is going to work based on getting smarter context engineering, better data, doing it more privately, more secure, then I think you need to ask yourself, is this a zero-sum game, meaning that every agent that gets deployed inside a SOC or security kind of operations, is that killing all the revenue from security? My answer would be, no, it's not. Maybe it's eating into security software revenue, but the TAM, or total addressable market for security labor, is 10 times bigger. And so if agents can go in and do the work of MSSPs, or partial work of MSSPs, or turbocharge kind of MSSPs, then I think that is going to be a net win for everyone, because we are all drowning in more alerts. And the biggest problem today is the democratization of hacking, right? I mean, that's what George Kurtz talks about a lot about, is that the tools that hackers now have to create their own Stuxnet or whatever it is, it's absolutely off the charts. They can jailbreak a model, they can build stuff. So offense, it's much easier to be on the offense than the defense. And so on the defensive side, you need AI. And so agents to me, so we've made a bunch of investments in companies that either can replace MSSPs completely with a full agent workforce, from investigating threats in real time to analyzing them to telling the human, these are the 3 things that you should think about. A, would you like me to fix it? B, would you like me to do further investigation, right? And so those are some other areas that I think are going to be absolutely massive. You've seen a lot of activity in that space from a builder perspective.
Let's go back to the concept of the vibe code or APIs and so on and so forth. I mean, they're kind of using models, and whatever you built, probably you're going to use some model to crack another model. When you talk to founders and look at all these prospects who come to you for financing and investment, like how do you figure this thing out? It's like which founder or which opportunity in this case, it's like is going to protect, in AI world. Oh, by the way, I'll be using some of the same code because it's a cat and mouse game. And it's like, so when you have so many AI tools, open source, closed source, and you have to keep up. This is not like, oh, well, once you have conquered, it's a dynamic security nowadays. It's contextual, as you pointed out, runtime, right? You want to make sure. How do you keep up with not just the data, but also the code, the brains of the security as the context keeps changing?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So it's very funny. It's like, let me give you an example. I was talking to a founder the other day, and they're like, okay, there's a problem I need to solve. And I could spend, 6 weeks kind of building a jury rig duct tape kind of process around it. Or I can wait until the next model ship or the model ship after that, because they'll just get embedded into the process. What do you think I should do? Right. So I think part of it is the smartest founders I know are building systems. They're not looking at just one model. They're building a system. And in that system, or let's just say workflow, a 10-step workflow, there might be 3 different models that are being used, because that is the best thing. It may be an edge model because they're doing some secure privacy stuff. It might be using Claude. It might be using OpenAI, but they can easily swap those things very, very easily. And so that's part one, is just kind of, you have to think about, you have to build for what the future is going to look like and finding that right balance.
One of the things I'm saying, and I would love to hear your thought, is, it's like creating digital twins of your network to simulate, the hacking.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about what you see is like how organizations are dealing with that, and new investment and products coming in this market where you can literally create a simulated environment, find all vulnerabilities, probably find the least path of resistance to fix it, and before the bad guys, find that out. Like, talk to me about some of those areas.
Yeah, so I think actually simulations in everything we do is going to be one of the most important kind of areas. So I'm glad you hit upon that. I've seen a bunch of companies recently. So first and foremost, you just have your standard kind of companies that are out there doing autonomous hacking, right? Autonomous pen testing. That's easy. There's dozens upon dozens upon dozens of companies doing that. Simulation is different because you have to actually, to your point, is accurately model kind of what a network looks like. And the larger the organization, the more interconnect points are, the more points that are sitting outside of kind of the owned 4 walls. It makes it much harder, and it's dynamic. So think about the amount of data that you should do there. Then you need a world model that can actually throw in it and just start understanding what is on each node, what packages are on each node, like what's running and all that stuff. So you need a massive asset inventory system. Then you need to be able to feed into a model. And then that model has to be able to operate in real time. So I think we're just hitting the very beginnings of that. But I think there's going to be a big company that gets built off of that, if you know what I mean. If you can access the data, you have to have the data, right? The data is the key.
The key. I mean, I've been doing, as a CIO for.
Is there something you're looking for, by the way?
Well, I mean, yes, I'll tell you, asset discovery, it sounds simple.
Yep.
Everybody claims that they have it, and every system I have seen is incomplete. As you can imagine, I have shadow IT all over the place. I have things on my network. I can see that. But with the cloud and the line between service and software has blurred. I don't know where to start, which one. When you really have to come to your point back to the data level. I mean, SaaS is dead,
Yeah.
in that sense, right? Network, you already have to assume that somebody has breached. So
Yeah.
applications, somebody's already inside. They're looking at your social security or your all personal information already floating.
Yeah.
How do you protect in that environment? I wonder how this industry is thinking in that context. So I would love to hear your thoughts.
You know what's funny? I think the word context is the most important word that you use. And I think I'll give you a good example. So we just funded a company out of Israel. We do a lot in Israel, by the way. There's amazing founders there. We have a history of doing things there, whether it's Sneak or Big ID or others. But the question that was asked is like, I think network security has to be reinvented and reimagined, right? Think about your old traditional network security. It used to be kind of, here are my four walls and here are people accessing it and this is what they're doing. But let's talk about what changed. There always has to be a why now. The why now is now you have agents that are going to be running amok. And the agent traffic is going to probably outnumber human traffic by 1,000 to 10,000 to 1 over time. It just will. And imagine now you're doing network traffic. There's no four walls. The four walls is a boundaryless perimeter where you're connecting to every different cloud, neo clouds, different systems, different companies. And what this company is saying is, in order to do network security the right way, to understand what agents are doing, you have to have the business context. So now imagine you see thousands and thousands of agents, but you know the business context of it. And therefore you can say, gee, that's a good business context and they're solving a really good problem. And I know about that problem. So yes, let that traffic through. And then I've never seen this agent before in my entire life. Do not let that traffic through. But that is context, right? And context-aware security, I think, is going to be massive. I have another company that's out of Israel too that, we're about to announce a $40 million round of funding. But they actually sit on top of all your security systems. So have you heard about those platforms for building agents like Dru Rai or N8N or things like that? So we're an investor in Dru Rai, so I know this very familiar, but you basically can come in with a platform right out of the box. You can orchestrate and build a multi-agent system. So imagine though you have a platform like that, but then it's security aware. It connects out of the box to 100 different security systems, connects out of the box to things like ServiceNow and AWS Cloud and everything else. And all of a sudden it just watches what happens. Then it starts suggesting to you, I notice that this workflow is happening over and over again from some of your people. Would you like me to automate that? And imagine that there's probably hundreds and hundreds of things that your people do on a repeated basis that could easily be automated. That's what I call context-aware multi-agent orchestration. And those are the things that are coming down the pike. And we've talked to CISOs about that. They're like, holy shit, that's like, yeah.
Let me ask you, given mostly it's a software sort of investment when it comes to data, the context, the behavior, because we have to. But, at the bottom of the AI is NVIDIA.
Yeah.
Everybody uses the same chip wrapped up in a different hardware, right? So when you, put on your sort of hardware hat, whether it's a network, servers, applications, and so on and so forth, in projecting yourself, a few years out, do you see maybe specialized hardware, maybe specialized model, maybe specialized GPU, maybe specialized brain being developed as we go forward?
Great question. It's already happening right now. So I just funded a company doing AI data center security. And so basically everything that Protect AI does, from we'll call it the AI bomb, the AI bill of materials, down to the layer where people and humans interact with models, et cetera, up to there, anything that touches that software, that's in the enterprise, but anything that moves from the enterprise to the neo cloud or the AI cloud data center, that's what this new company covers. And what do you need to understand? So let's just talk about NVIDIA, which is kind of the market leader. NVIDIA has something called, they have GPUs, which everyone knows what it does, but they also have DPUs. They're called data processing units. And those data processing units, you can build custom security software that sits in line with the GPU and build applications that tap into the DPU. So you can have inline security kind of analysis. So you can look at kind of exfiltration attacks, hijacking attacks of the GPU, right? Hijacking the GPU to do Bitcoin mining. You can look also and leveraging that to look at network interconnectivity, kind of because there's attacks happening that can happen between GPU to GPU on their interconnect. So there's a whole bunch of things. So right now already, NVIDIA has DPUs and people are starting to think about, how do I build something inline to protect those things? Because they're very expensive. It's a resource. And I think it's going to be a massive, massive market to lock that down. And there hasn't been a seminal attack yet, but it's the same thing as Protect AI until there's a seminal opportunity. But when there is one seminal attack, when a nation state comes in, you can sure bet that everyone's going to be looking at how the hell do I lock this shit down?
I mean, it's a basic supply chain 101, right? I mean, almost every AI company is built on NVIDIA.
Yeah, and then you have the CUDA layer too, right? So there's a whole bunch. The CUDA layer, the software layer, can also easily get manipulated. So there's a whole bunch of things that go into it that we did the analysis around with these two founders. And anyway, that is we're going to announce that in the next 3 months as well. So I'm just trying to figure out, the smart people come to me through friends of friends, and we're just trying to see, what does the future look like, right? And they tell me I'm not smart enough to predict the future. The founders are.
Well, you are modest enough. I mean, finding a smart founder itself is a skill. So let's go back to some basics and some personal. How did you end up doing this? Walk me a personal journey from school to where you are today.
All right. Well, my personal journey, it always starts kind of with my parents, who were immigrants from Korea. So they came with nothing to Baltimore, Maryland, and so and they always instilled education, just saying, "Hey, the only way out, the American dream, is to work really hard, whatever you do." And so that was the thing that they instilled in me. That, and I think the second thing would be curiosity. So long as you're always curious. Fast forward, I ended up going to Harvard undergrad. I played sports there, so I was a lacrosse player. So I also, once again, learned that, I probably wasn't the best athlete, but I worked very, very hard. So I actually, earned a lot of accolades kind of going through that. But once again, it was all about what you do and showing up every single day. And I remember that one of my friend's brothers talked about what venture capital was. This was in the early 90s. And he said, "Hey, it's like being a player coach. Sometimes you can go in and be a player, but you're really a coach, and you don't have all your eggs in one basket, but you can have like 12 different baskets that you play in. And your job is to help people dream the future and accomplish those dreams. And you play a small part in that, but it's exciting to see kind of that." And so that was kind of this mentality I had. So fast forward, I ended up moving to New York in 93. I got a job doing derivatives kind of modeling and training. So I learned Visual Basic. I learned how to code. And then fast forward, the Netscape, I started using Mosaic browser and Netscape. And then in 96, 3 years later, I was going to go back to Wharton Business School. And I was like, oh, I know how to code. This new internet moment is here. I don't want to actually be in school. And I landed a job at a VC fund in New York, which is one of the first VC funds ever, called Prospect Street Ventures, partially funded by the government.
Oh,
So this is funded by the New York City Economic Development Corporation under Dinkins, I believe.
I'm definitely.
And so it was a double bottom line goal, was to help build a quote unquote high tech sector in New York, but also create jobs. And that was in 1996. So I've been involved in that New York area since then. And what I learned over time was that we are not Silicon Valley, meaning that New York tended to be more practical. They wanted the faster horse versus the flying car. And what I learned by meeting with CISO, well, they weren't CISOs, but CIOs or heads of technology, was what they wanted, but then how do you translate the Silicon Valley language of flying car to faster horse? And that was kind of part of the journey that I went on, which is kind of how Boldstart really started, was that, hey, you just look at signals. I started Boldstart in 2010 after having gone through and helping start another fund. And I just kept hearing founders saying, I don't need a lot of money to start. I need someone smart. I have open source. I have EC2, which was the predecessor of the cloud from Amazon. I have S3 buckets. And I need access to enterprises. And there was a translation layer. I was like the abstraction layer, right? For technical people and the buyer.
Such an amazing story. And, there's so much code out there. It just takes a smart person to tap those, and a smart person to tap those smart persons. So that's where you come in. Tell me about the firm, the practice. What are you excited, in coming years? Would love to hear that.
Yeah. So my firm right now is myself and two other partners. My partner, Elliot Durbin, who's been there with me from the very early days. And then he lives he spends his time in San Francisco, Miami, New York. And then my other partner is Ellen Chisa, who is up in Boston. She's a former founder of ours, who started a dev tools company as CEO and founder, and she ended up joining us. And I say that, we just closed our largest fund, which is a $250 million fund. We could have closed 400 or 500 million, but we just don't want so much money. We just want enough money to find the best technical founders who, I kind of make it a joke, but I used AI to create this very fun video I can share with you later using, at the time, it was Bigfoots and Yetis kind of out there doing funny things. So we had Bigfoots and Yetis kind of announcing our fund. I built it myself. And the vision was to fund technical founders building the autonomous enterprise. And it's kind of a joke because that's the aspiration. The aspiration is that, imagine having one person with thousands of agents just doing work and that was it, and you're generating $1 billion. Look, that's never going to happen. But that's a great aspiration to kind of work towards. And think about all the infrastructure and tooling and software you're going to need to build to realize that future. And that's kind of what we want to do is kind of, and how do you secure that, right? And what dev tools do you need to do that? And I believe that the thing that gets me most excited is that, look, I was there from the very beginning of the internet boom, and I kind of saw that, and I saw the ups and downs. They lived through a few bubbles. I lived through the 2008 financial crisis. Yet here we still are. But I think this opportunity is bigger than I've ever seen before. It's kind of built on the shoulders of prior giants. It's moving faster than we ever have. I was talking to someone the other day that this year is already moving twice as fast as last year in terms of, Cloud Cowork came out, right? And just if you're not building and diving into those things, you're absolutely missing out. So those things excite me. And then third is, I fundamentally believe that everything that we built for humans is going to have to be rebuilt for agents. Agents are going to discover things differently. They're going to have to scale differently. You're going to have to secure things differently. So that whole infrastructure has to be rebuilt from scratch, almost the way that the internet kind of was built. And so those are the things we look for. That's what excites me. And honestly, I was just talking to my father-in-law the other day. He's like asking me, what does AGI mean, right? What's the generalized aspect of it? And I said, all of us don't know what it means really, but people think that, just with the advances already, I just think that maybe sometime next year, we may feel some of it, and that to me is like, holy shit, then what happens? There's a lot of questions to think about. So I have no idea, but we're making this shit up as we go along, and you need to adapt and adapt and adapt. The final thing I'll say is that what I really think about is, as any human being, whether you're a CIO or CISO or a VC or a founder, that learning velocity is probably the most important thing you can do. And for me, learning velocity means is, how do you take in all the knowledge? How do you actually extract the signal from the noise? How do you run some experiments very quickly? How do you ditch the ones that don't work? And how do you keep reapplying that into whatever you're building? It could be stuff. It could be things from like your messaging. It could be stuff in your product. It could be how you invest. It could be in kind of what software you buy, what people you hire. But that learning velocity, that's the only thing that you can control in a world that is moving faster than we've ever seen before.
So if there is a prospect founder listening to this conversation, what are the 3 things you look for if that founder ever was able to reach you? Like, what are the top 3 things you're like, I want to see this. If you got it, then we'll talk.
See, I'm a frameworks kind of person. So I have call it the 5 Ps. So first of all is, if you've already raised money, you're too late for us. I want to help you in the idea maze, because that's where that's where we have the most fun. It's not about the money for me. It's the most fun. It's the most exciting thing is, how do you will something into existence, and how do you play a small part in that as an investor? So people is probably the most important thing, right? Is kind of what gives you the reason and unique insight. Like, where do you get that from? And that's usually from deep, hard-earned experience or some pain. It's one of those things where you wake up every day in the shower thinking to yourself, how do I solve that problem? And they're usually technical, right? 2 is passion, right? Because at the end of the day, I can work with lots of people, but the passion about what you're building, it's an obsession, right? Meaning that doing a startup is one of the hardest things ever. I have ultimate respect. My job is way easier compared to a startup founder, because they wake up every day and get their ass kicked 10 times, 9 times out of 10, they have to peel themselves off the ground. And maybe the 10th time, the customer says yes, or the product works forever. So the passion is going to be what carries them through, not anything else. The willing it to existence. 3rd is product. Product is very important, which we talked about earlier, because you have to not only be able to tell a buyer or a hire a story about how big this can be, but you also have to zoom into the everyday life of a user and show them how their life is going to be 10 to 100 times better using your product. And if you don't have the ability to zoom in and zoom out, then there's going to be a big problem. Potential will be the other thing. How big can this be if it works? I understand that 999,999 things can go wrong, but if one thing goes right, how big is this going to be, right? And those are some of and then problem and pain, right? The last thing is, are you solving a real pain, or is this just like a vitamin? And those would be the 5 things I look for.
I'm going to ask last questions. Like, right now you had a few interesting projects. tell me about, tell our viewers about, our listeners, what are those some cool ideas in next 3-4 years which you're trying to, realize?
Yeah, I think this whole GPU kind of the AI data center security space is going to be super, super fascinating. I'll keep it on a security only lens. Um, I also think about kind of hackers go where there are problems. So right now there aren't a lot of robots deployed in the United States. There's tons of robots in China. But imagine a world where the robots are running amok everywhere. How do you create a safety or security layer around those robots? You sure bet there's going to be hundreds or thousands of robots running in a factory. Someone's going to try to hack them. You also have a safety issue too. Imagine like um, a robot on wheels, if it actually kind of fails and it stops, it's just going to sit there. But a humanoid robot that fails, what happens if it fails? Does it fall on somebody? Does it hurt a child? Does it hurt a human being? Does it go into kind of child mode? Right. So I'm just saying, so that to me, that layer is going to be absolutely fucking fascinating. It's going to be so big and so anyway, that's something that I've been kind of exploring as well. Right. So that's kind of how it's almost sci-fi. I like reading sci-fi books, right, to kind of get a glimpse of the future. But do you agree? I mean, these are things that are ideas that don't exist that will be inevitable.
Well, I mean, 3 years going to come pretty fast, to your point.
Yep.
And there are already robots out there.
Yeah.
And to your point, I mean, today it's like, well, let's segment the network, let's minimize the damage.
Yeah.
But a one small lift can kill few people, in Amazon warehouses. It's as simple as that. So, well, Ed, there are so many interesting things, you brought in cyber side. Do you guys invest in other areas than cyber?
We do. We do. We probably spend a third. We probably in our portfolios, we've invested like in 100 plus companies. Probably a third is cyber, and I spend half my time in it just because I love cyber. But we also spend a lot of time. I call it the autonomous enterprise. That includes the infrastructure around it, like dev tooling. It could be Dru AI is one. It's a multi-agent AI framework for people to build. It's one of the leading ones out there. We also do app layer now, which is really more agents. It's agents just kind of doing work, right? And that could include companies like June, JON, which is a company in Israel that actually can come out with agents replacing MSSPs and doing that service work. It's a company like Waldo.fyi doing research kind of for market strategists, right? That just raised a big round of funding. And then also we do the physical AI layer. So physical AI means that we funded a company called generalistai.com, which is two guys out of Google DeepMind and someone out of Boston Dynamics. They're creating their own foundational model for robotics. They're starting out with robotic hand dexterity, but the key is that they have their own data mode. They send out these 3D printed devices with cameras on it, and we have people in Latin America wearing them all day long, doing work, and we take that video and we upload it, and then we apply that to factory settings. That company's raised a fair amount of capital, not only from us, but NVIDIA and Jeff Bezos and others, right? And then we've also done something in the biospace, which just got announced last week called Topos Bio. And what they're doing, it's a founder that I've known for a long time from college. He was the founder and co-founder and CTO of Nirvana Systems, one of the first AI systems in a chip company, sold to Intel back in the day. He was CTO of AI at Intel. And he actually wants to solve a problem with his co-founder and CEO, Ryan Zircone, who's a biotech kind of entrepreneur, founder, successful guy, to go after the proteins that AlphaFold is not solving. AlphaFold solves folding proteins. And there's another third of the human body, which is called IDPs, or intrinsically disordered proteins, and they're dynamically shaped. They're very hard to solve. He's bringing principles from molecular dynamics, doing original cellular research, and bringing AI experts in to solve that problem. They just announced it. So if we solve that problem, this is how big we can solve neurodegenerative diseases and other things like that. So yes, we do expand it, but it's all built by software. It's all powered by software.
Well, I promise this will be the last question. Given the impact of technology, AI, ultimately is going to change the society.
Yeah.
And it has changed. I mean, train changed the buggies and airplane changed the chain and so on and so forth. Tell me about your what the next 10 years going to look like from workforce based on, all these technology, including AI, coming up in different sectors. What are the world, are we going to come in a chrome dresses and have flying cars? Like, what do you see in 10 years?
Yeah. I think this is going to probably be a driver of the fastest and biggest societal change that we'll ever see. Right? I mean, this is going to take what happened in the Industrial Revolution, and the invention of steam and electricity, and it's the change is going to be accelerated by 10x. Right? Those things took 40 years, 50 years. The next 10 years. I mean, I mean, we're going to have some issues in society, right? If we don't fix those, because the people that use AI and understand AI are going to be far superior in terms of productivity than the ones that don't. So I think there's a lot of job training that has to be done. I think the second thing is when you live in a world of abundance where everything is happening, everything's being done for you, I wonder what happens to the human being, right? Because there's this thing where like there's AI brain rot. The more you use AI, the less you're thinking on your own. And I think people need to force themselves to really understand first principles, like even take first passes themselves and then figuring out when I should be using AI or not. I think third is I think humans are going to be more important. Even so, I think face to face like this is going to be much more important. It's going to be the only way to tell deep fakes from not deep fakes. It's going to allow people to do business, right? I think perhaps we'll have more free time to actually spend with people, because the thing that I used to have anxiety around always was that every time I was meeting someone, there's hundreds of emails piling up behind me and shit wasn't getting done. That shit's being done right now. I've got agents going out and doing that. I wake up in the morning and say, Claude Cowork, tell me everything I missed, draft 15 emails, fix it, right? But humans are going to be more and more important. And then I think the final thing is we're going to have to figure out how to bring the people up, that are not kind of involved in AI, get them captured as quickly as possible. Because guess what? China's doing it in a very, very big way.
It's mind-boggling, me coming from public sector and public policy. The speed of change is mind-boggling. And somebody asked me that this will create, haves and have-nots
Yes.
bigger than we had ever before at the speed we have not seen. What's your thought on that?
Yes, that is, it's all exciting and scary at the same time, right? And I think that the optimist in me says that, hey, once upon a time, financial analysts didn't exist, right? When kind of Lotus 1, 2, 3 came out, right? Software developers didn't exist really, and then we had lots of software engineers. Now everyone's a software engineer. So I do feel like that we will adapt and there'll be new jobs created, right? For sure. I just don't know what they're going to look like. None of us really know exactly what they're going to look like. But I think the second piece is there's gonna be a lot of societal dislocation, to my point earlier, right? And so I think we all have to do our part in terms of thinking about how to spread the wealth, spread the idea of AI, have people like, I think schools have to embrace AI versus running away from it and things like that. And so, because guess what? China's doing it right now. They're investing a lot. China, I saw this chart the other day in the Financial Times. I have to find it, but it was showing that what is the penetration of AI and what is the fear index around AI? And they had the lowest fear index around AI versus other countries, probably because it's a nationalized thing. It's important. So yeah, I hope we can all do more.
Well, Ed, thank you so much for your time and your insights. I would love to catch up again
Yeah,
in a few months, and good luck with everything, and thank you for your time.
glad you're in Miami too.
Thank you.